welcome back to the Village People. In this video, we're going to take a look at a homebrew race called the Florae. We're going to examine their history, their culture, and what makes them different from other playable races for D&D 5th edition. So without further ado, let's take a look at the Florae. The Florae are a race of sentient plant life creatures. They're widely varied, with no individual looking the exact same as another. This has led to a simple but prominent difficulty that Florae face on a daily basis. It's influenced their historical development, so to speak, then. Typically, unwilling to disconnect from the chosen location for long periods, Florae can live their entire lives without seeing the world outside of their own glade. This has made it difficult for many Florae to have any connections with the outside world, and their impact on it is typically not realized in many traditional cultures. They are mostly secretive, and the largest impacts that the Florae have on other societies typically come when a small collection of their kind and their own glade is threatened. At which point, the powerful and devastating Florae can perform startling acts of violence in defense of their home. Florae culture is typically a simple, uniform lifestyle among the glades of different kind of familial clan groups. These families, while not a simple or traditional family in the kind of the strict nuclear family sense, are more of a collective than almost anything else. Florae live their lives rooted in place and otherwise indistinguishable from a normal plant. During this time, they simply communicate through their root systems with others around them, and they can spend their entire lives in one place physically, but in entire worlds within their minds. Disruptions to this peaceful lifestyle are not taken lightly, and any truly dangerous force that can be stopped by the glade is typically avoided as the members of the glade flee to greener pastures, or destroyed entirely as the glade rallies against a newfound foe. Basically, in kind of a summary for what their culture is, these individuals are likened to sentient plant life. One could be a small birch tree, taller than the ones around it, than other plant life in the grove, but ultimately they live in a connective consciousness where they all basically daydream together as they just soak up the sun's rays and behave almost the exact same as a normal plant would. Basically, they don't need to be anything else. They don't need to be a humanoid or a playable race from this perspective, right? But the inciting incident of a potential threat is what really makes this race stand out. So what you can do is have there be, from an adventuring standpoint, I am trying to find a new home glade for my people. They're currently trying to get, across this part of the world. I need a little bit of help doing these things. And so then you join in as part of an adventure, and there you are. You're looking for a new home, one that fits, and maybe it's very particular. You're not quite sure exactly what you need, but you have some specific requirements, and nothing seems to be perfect. Otherwise, there's the potential that you can have your entire glade having been wiped out and you are the only survivor, and now you're trying to find the other secretive glades of other Florae in an attempt to join them and find a new home. Maybe you find out that you don't need to be a part of the other Florae culture. You can be the adventuring humanoid type and get along with the other traditional races like humans and elves and other things. Florae are basically one step removed from being a dryad in terms of a playable race for D&D, and they are the closest thing to Groot that I can possibly imagine building here. In terms of Florae appearance, Florae resemble plant life of really any kind in a vaguely humanoid shape, unless they are hiding as another mundane plant. During this time, they resemble the plant itself in all meaningful forms. Their size does vary largely on the flora that's kind of the target camouflage of them. There can be individuals that are camouflaged to be an entire tree. and therefore would be a large-sized creature. They are otherwise smaller ones that are daisies. There are other ones that are even just fruits or fruit bodies that seem to have fallen and they just remain there in place. So dragon fruit and mango and everything else like that, while it would rot, and normally if it was not a living thing, otherwise in this form just remains there. And while an easy enough target, the rest of the Florae community can defend these individuals. Now, they are relatively limited on what sort of plant life that they have in kind of their birth, so to speak, their conception here, what plant life or what structure of plant life they have chosen to camouflage as. And this does not necessarily change over the course of their life. So if you chose to be an oak tree and you went out to a desert, you're just an oak tree wandering the desert. And so it's part of the challenge there is how do you deal with that? But with their size varying largely with some flora being based off of these different things, they typically resemble a plant of similar size to their normal form. And so this is kind of how you tie it hand in hand. Tiny Florae, like I said, could appear to be like a daisy, or a medium may appear as a rose bush, while large could appear as a small tree. Regardless of their size and appearance, though, entire glades will vary based on the plant life around them, with the familial bonds holding them kind of having no sway over their appearance. If two birch tree Florae produced an offspring, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is inherently a birch tree Florae. It can be anything else that's in the area, and it'll depend. And this is part of how, as nature develops and the idea of succession from grassland to forest and everything along those lines, as things develop and change, Florae are able to, in their own populations, develop and change. And so they're able to, over those generations, have different disguises and camouflage. So what exactly do you get if you actually want to play a Florae? Well, let's go look through kind of the actual stats here. As a Florae, you would have these traits by default. You would have an ability score increase due to your plant-like form, you have some enhanced abilities. You have a +2 to your constitution score and a +1 to any other score of your choice. Ideally, this is reflecting your hardiness as plant life. Imagine being kind of a massive oak tree Florae. Of course, you're going to be relatively tough, but also this constitution is tied to the fact that you, for the majority of your life, have been plugged in to what is effectively a massive immune system. Think of it almost like the way that a illithid or a mind flayer is connected to the elder brain, and there's a collective consciousness of a hive mind there. With this, you are connected not just to the mind, but you are connected to a system that has put you through a number of different things and has made it so that you've always had the support to fight things off. So you've been exposed to quite a few different things, and that has made it very easy for you and your body to understand how to fight off diseases, poisons, and other dangers. Then you choose a +1 to any other score of your choice, and this should be somewhat reflective of what your Florae kind of disguise would be. If you are a Florae disguised as seaweed, maybe it's dexterity. If you are a Florae that is based off of a massive tree, it could be strength. Or if you are a Florae that's based off of kind of a rose bush, it could be charisma. Those kinds of things will end up kind of being whatever you choose and what you would like, but it's pretty rewarding otherwise to actually match those things in together. You also have a trait called Speech of the Leaves. As a Florae, you have the ability to communicate with plant life around you. Once per long rest, you may cast Commune with Nature without expending a spell slot, and this spell does not count against the total spells that you know. This, once again, harkens back to your ability to set down roots to some extent. This is your connection to the life around you, and this is, to some extent, how the individual Florae communities would establish entirely new glades, is by finding a way to commune and finding a way to understand. And so if you are the adventurer searching for a new home for your people, communing with nature on a relatively daily basis to try to find out what's in the area, what's dangerous, is it safe here, these kinds of things, is going to be very beneficial. And this is just tapping into the raw internet that is kind of the plant life root connection. You also have a trait called photosynthesizer. Your plant-like form has no specific need for food. Instead, it is capable of drawing sustenance from sunlight itself. Basically, you do not need to eat physical food as long as you have access to water and at least 8 hours of sunlight. If you are without sunlight, you may instead consume physical food, but you do require twice the typical amount compared to non-Florae creatures. The idea here is that if you do not have the ability to simply consume sunlight and photosynthesize to that level, you can use food to, in a sense, be fertilizer, but it's not as efficient. And you require twice as much to be able to do the things that you need, because it needs to be able to be slowly ingested. And so ultimately you would be struggling, but possibly living, is kind of the way that it should be framed. Is this is not your preferred means, and it is costly to live this way, which is why you will almost always benefit from specifically just traveling out in the open all day. And then you have the otherwise unknowable nature of plant life compared to most other adventurers who sit down, need to quick make some food and drink some water, and you're just kind of there like, nah, I'm good. You know, I'll have some water, but I'm good. And that's kind of the thing that lets you do, is have a difference of what you actually need on a day-to-day basis. The final trait that you do have here is somewhat twofold. This is the final trait called growth. Your plant-like form has the ability to expand in rapid bursts of growth if needed to defend yourself or those around you. You can spend any number of your hit dice to create a growth of sorts that can be used to solve problems or create weapons to defend yourself. Now, there's the two different pieces of this are natural weapons and natural growths. Ultimately, if you choose to make a natural weapon, you can spend 2 of your hit dice to create any weapon that you are proficient with. This weapon deals damage of the type associated with that weapon. So if you were going to be creating something that is like a massive thorn and treat it like it's a rapier, then it's a rapier. And you treat it like it's a rapier doing piercing damage. This damage, though, is equal to your hit dice value. And once per turn, you can spend an additional hit dice to add the rolled total to a single attack on your turn with this weapon. Basically, you can spend 2 hit dice to make it, and then you can spend additional hit dice to augment additional damage, because this is something that you not only created, but this is a part of, at least it used to be, your body. And so connection with it allows you to make it even more powerful. So while it takes 2 hit dice to make it, and you can augment it to do, 1 more additional hit die worth of damage, if you are of a relatively high class, like if you are a Florae barbarian, then you can say, you know what, I'm going to make a dagger, but this dagger does 1d12 extra damage whenever I try to use it. And now it'll be doing 1d4 normally as the normal weapon, but an additional 1d12 on top of that is not anything to scoff at. Any weapon that you do create, however, can also be wielded by another creature. However, once the item is removed from your body, you do take damage equal to the hit dice spent. So basically, while you hold this weapon, you spend 2 of your hit dice to be able to actually make this weapon as a growth. Then you can lop that growth off of your body and hand it off to someone and make a weapon, which is neat. And over time it'll degrade and rot away. But for now, if you're all in a tight situation and you need to rapidly arm some people, If you're willing to sacrifice the ability to rapidly heal later, you can outfit a small group of people with whatever weapons they might need. Now, you can't necessarily add your hit die, additional hit die on a single attack roll this way because it needs to be connected to your body, but that allows you to make a variety of different weapons and tools as needed. The other half of the ability is something called natural growths. You may spend a number of hit dice proportional to the size of a creation that you wish to create. Once created, this creation is split from the body and can be manipulated if you wish. This creation, if used to deal damage, deals damage equal to the hit dice value of the appropriate type determined by your DM. If used as a protective measure, it can absorb an amount of damage equal to the hit dice spent in the creation of the item. Roll these hit points for the creation when it is first created. The object itself has an armor class of 10, and if reduced to 0, any extra damage is transferred to any creature that is protecting. Now, this is going to be interesting here, because this is the closest thing to making a massive Groot twig ball to survive in a spaceship crash, kind of that kind of a thing, from the first Guardians of the Galaxy. This is the thing that you can, in theory, do as a Florae. Now, there's a chart here that has all the different sizes, and this is reflected of kind of the creature sizes. So if you wanted to make a tiny creation, simple enough, it can be something that's handheld to maybe up the size of a goblin, and it's 1 hit die for you to spend. If it's a small creation, it's 2, and then 4, and up. And if you were to make a gargantuan level creation, you would be spending 12 hit die. Now, ultimately, if you don't have the hit dice available to actually create something, you can't go negative, and you will ultimately be spending these things to develop a piece of an object, and this object will degrade over time. But you can choose these growths to spread from your body in an effort more closely to resemble this plant. It ends up being kind of a plant-like structure that allows you to do a variety of things. If you were to make a shield, if you were to make a wall, if you were going to set up something to stop things, those kinds of things are possible. Now, the other thing that you can do here is you can cause these growths to spread from your body in an effort to more closely resemble a plant. During this time, any attempt to identify you as anything other than a typical plant must be made against your nature skill. You may add your proficiency bonus to a nature check when adopting this form, and any creature attempting to discern you as not a normal plant must make an investigation or nature check against your total nature skill roll check. Now this is, a shield, a sword, hiding. Now this is, for the most part, the majority of what a adventurer's balanced breakfast is. You have your armor, you have your protection, you have your weapons, you have the ability to sneak around and hide, you have the ability with this one to hide in plain sight and then ambush if you really want to. And so a Florae rogue would be very adept with what they can do, because they can even create additional damaging dice in their weapons, and then also sneak attack and all of these kinds of things, which makes this race extremely powerful for what you can do. But they do have some of their limited drawbacks. For example, they are vulnerable in this one for their kind of plant-like form ability here. They are vulnerable to fire damage, which is a relatively common form of damage. And that makes it so that they need to be very careful when it comes to what they can do for spell casting, traveling with spellcasters, traveling in environments that aren't otherwise inhospitable to their typical form. These kinds of things make it so that if you are to play a Florae, you can do a lot. And there is a lot that you can do as a basic race to be extremely creative. But you need to be very careful at the same time. That's it for the Florae. Thank you all for watching. Let me know which homebrew race you'd like to see next. But otherwise, thank you all for watching once again here, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!